Do we have anyone who would like to read verses 1 to 3?
What chapter are you?
Revelation chapter 1.
Chapter 1?
Starting at the beginning.
Okay. Introduction and benediction. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants, things which must shortly take place. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw. It is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near.
Thank you. Okay, so some things that I'd like you to notice. 3 verses, they're fairly basic verses. We read them all independently last week, so they shouldn't be too new to anyone. I want you to notice this book is in the form of a prophecy. Not just because verse 3 says this is a prophecy, which is pretty obvious that it is a prophecy, but when we compare the introduction, the first 2 verses, with books of prophecy from the Old Testament, it's laid out exactly like a prophecy. Right? So it's the structure of the introduction that gives us even more clues to know that this is a prophecy from God and should be read as one. Okay? So what I want us to do, can I get somebody to find us Amos chapter 1 verse 1? We're only looking at the first verse. Can I get somebody else? Sharina, are you on looking for Amos?
Yeah.
John, can I get you to find Micah chapter 1 verse 1? And Leonie, can I get you to find us Jeremiah chapter 1 verses 1 to 3? What I want us to do is to compare what we've just read in Revelation with what it says in the Old. So instead of me just telling you, hey guys, this is the same as the Old Testament, we're looking at, and you can look at all of the books of prophecy, they all start kind of like this.
Okay, the book of Amos. The word of Amos, who was among the sheep breeders of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake.
Thank you. So we've got who this was given to, when it was given, and the context. All right, so there's a setup in this. And prophecies, when a prophet received a prophecy, they were recorded and written down, and then they were taken and stored in a treasury of prophecies at the temple. There was a person who was responsible, a priest who was responsible for maintaining all these prophecies. Because remember, we were talking about prophecies being things that happen in the future. Now, what happened is, if your prophecy didn't come true, not only was your prophecy thrown out, but you were likely killed off as well. So there's a bit of incentive to getting this right and to not speaking falsely as if it's coming from God. Okay, we forget that sometimes. There's lots of people who deliver words from the Lord that I reckon aren't quite sourced from the Lord. Okay, but you've got this context. So every prophecy has a bit of an introduction about who it was given to and when and where and all those sort of things. Let's hear about Micah.
The word of the Lord that came to Micah of somebody, more share.
Yep.
That's fair, right?
That'll do.
In the days of Joathan, Asher, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem.
Okay. Again, we found out who the prophet is, where they're from, and what it's kind of about. Okay. Leonie?
The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah of the priests, who were in Anatoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, got no glasses on, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign.
Here we go. Do you want to keep going? Yeah, up to 3.
Okay. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, the king of Judah, until the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, and the king of Judah, until the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month.
Okay. What I want you to notice is different about Jeremiah is we've got a range of different prophecies They kind of start here and then they go through here and then they go, like there's different time periods and these are prophecies over time. Whereas the book of Revelation, Glennis, do you want to read us Revelation chapter 1, verse 1?
The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his bondservants the things which must soon take place. And he sent and communicated it by his angel to his bondservant John.
What I want you to notice is, this is not revelations. This is a revelation. This is one chunk of prophecy. It's not like in Jeremiah, where Jeremiah received a bunch of different visions over a bunch of different times that applied to a bunch of different circumstances, or any of the major prophets who were receiving prophecies over time. You know, even in Daniel, there's a period here and there's a period there, and then the time goes past and something else happens and there's more prophecy, and you've got a bunch of different events being prophesied at different times. This is a singular revelation, one big series of events that are going to happen soon. But it's established in exactly the same way that the Old Testament prophets introduced their books. Okay, so there's no doubt that this is a prophecy. This is where we're going with this. A lot of people will tell you, oh, it's a nice story, oh, it's got good ideas in it. Yeah, it's a message from God, but it's got principles, and that's all we need to take from it. It's not really talking about real events. Well, it's talking as much about real events as all of the prophecies of the Old Testament are, and it's introduced in exactly the same way. Now, I want you to also have a look at the chain of communication. So this isn't just God speaking to a prophet who writes it down. We've got God originating this message, giving it to Jesus, who is providing it to an angel, who is the one who communicates it to John. John is the one who writes it down and then sends it out to the 7 churches and obviously to us for our inclusion in our Bible. Okay, there's a big chain of custody here. So this is not just something that John wrote because he thought it was good. It's not like a book that he authored. All right, John would have been completely out of his mind with what he saw happening, and this is probably why God keeps having to tell him to, or the angels keep telling him to write, because he's probably dumbstruck, I would imagine, by what he's seeing, and he's like, write it down. Oh, okay. And in we go to write it down. Okay, but there's a chain of custody here, and it originates with God. It includes Jesus, and then we've got a delivery mechanism to get it to earth. The Apostle John goes to pains here to say this is not the revelation of John, this is the revelation of Jesus. Sometimes this is titled, the Apocalypse of St. John the Divine. Right? That's in the King James, that's how it's communicated. But if you read the words of the letter, John is going out of his way to say it's a revelation from Jesus Christ. I'm just the one who had to write it down. Okay, controversial words in this little section. So the most controversial thing that I can see in here is events that must soon take place, or the concept that this is going to happen soon, because we hear the word soon and we think just after lunch or just after dinner or just like soon, like not far away, not later, but soon. And when we look at the Greek word that's used in this writing, it also means in quickness. So if we imagine...
What was that word?
In quickness.
Oh, okay.
So like a domino effect or a chain reaction. So once it starts, you can have your dominoes set up all through the house, but once you hit the first one, you knock the first one over, there's no stopping the rest of them, right? It's going to happen quickly. As soon as it starts, it's going to happen one after the other. Okay, and that's essentially what we've got here. We've got a whole series of events that, once they start, are going to happen in quick succession. It's just they haven't started yet, or at least the end times, the tribulation period hasn't started yet. But once that starts, we're going to see the contents of the 7 seals happening one after the other, after the other, after the other. We're going to see the 7 trumpets, one after the other, after the other, after the other. We're going to see the 7 vials or bowls of wrath, one after the other. These things aren't just going to happen one and then there'll be a big gap of time and then another one and there'll be a big gap of time. They're going to really feel like they're happening one after the other. So if we understand that word, we don't get misled about, we've been thinking for 2,000 years it was going to happen soon. That's a load of rubbish. Of course it's not soon. No, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about it's going to happen in quick succession. Now, the other concept that's covered just in these first 3 verses is the notion of blessing. And we talked about this a little bit last week, so we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. But there is a blessing. Lynn, could you read verse 3, Revelation 1, verse 3 for us?
Blessed is he that readeth, and that they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand.
So there's a 3-part blessing that actually has 2 parts. Okay, there's a blessing upon reading of this book. There's a reason that we read the first 3 verses all in one go. We're going to be doing that every study. We're going to be reading the passages that we're studying. We're not just going to pick a verse here and a verse there, because I want you to get the context and the feel. And we also want to have the blessing upon reading it out loud. There is a blessing promise, which is amazing, because it's the only prophecy that carries a blessing. It's the only part of the Bible that carries a blessing. Why is that? Probably because it's difficult to read and understand, and because there needs to be some sort of incentive to get people to do it. Otherwise, God knew this was going to be tricky for Christians to understand. So that's the first part, the reader. The second part of the blessing is on hearing and keeping, or hearing and obeying, hearing and implementing what it says. Now, just hearing it isn't good enough. Just listening to what the words are isn't enough to secure this blessing. The blessing is on putting it into practice. Now, this is another reason why I say we're meant to understand this book, because God's not going to expect us to put anything into practice if we don't understand what we need to do.
The Bible also the truth later on too, not to be hearers of the word, only not to be doers.
And faith without works being dead. There's all kinds of references to we need to actually put this in place and action it. Just listening to it or knowing it is not good enough.
Well, mine, and I don't know whether your version said it, blessed are those who hear it and take to heart.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the taking to heart,
Yeah.
is it the same? Mine says obey what it says.
Mm. What did yours say, Lee?
That they hear the word, the prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein.
It's funny because the heart outworking of spiritual things is to obey and to do. All right, it's not just enough to keep it in your heart and lock it away and never action it. It comes out, we have an outflowing. But that's what we need to secure this blessing. It's not enough just to hear it. We need to put it into practice. We've seen the introduction of this book as a prophecy. We've seen the promise of a blessing, and that blessing is not just being happy, not just being joyful, not just having stuff, because lots of times we misconstrue blessing to be those things. This is about being the recipient of divine favour. This is about having God look on you and going, oh wow, my servant here is doing really well, and I'm going to bless their endeavours. I'm going to connect them up with prosperity. I'm going to help them to do what they need to do, or what I'm asking them to do. All right. So this is about connecting us with our callings. This is about, it's like having the teacher's favourite got the good jobs. All right. The teacher's favourite gets prime position. God doesn't have favourites, but he does have favourites, and it's not a bad thing for God to view people individually and differently. And of course, God is going to be keeping a closer eye on his servants who are understanding what's going on and out of response to this, out in the world, sharing the gospel. Okay, so it's kind of favourites without favourites. It's an interesting concept. But yeah, God does love all of his children differently. Those of you with children, you love them all. Love's not something you can quantify. It's not something that you have when you have an extra child. So that is less available for each child. Love is something that is unquantifiable as a parent. And you multiply your capacity to love when you have more to love. Mm. I also, when I view my children, I love them both, but I love them in slightly different ways for slightly different reasons. Right? They're very different individuals. Yeah. And sometimes the things that when they're doing things that really please me and they've listened to what I've advised them to do, I'm going to connect them up with more opportunity, aren't I? rather than the ones, the ones who are difficult. So, God doesn't love us all the same, all right? And divine favour is just a recognition that God views people taking his word seriously as a good thing. So essentially we've covered the first 3 verses. Isn't that good? We've now ticked off 2 chunks of this study. The next section is important because we've established this book now as a book of prophecy, and we've talked about the blessing that comes with hearing and with keeping, or with reading with hearing and with keeping it. Now we need to establish this as a letter. All right, so the next section is about Revelation introduced as a letter, and in my translation it talks about John's greeting to the 7 churches.
It's pretty terrible for the people who've missed out on such important knowledge about Revelation. And they're the ones that are going to be in a lot of trouble.
The one thing that you will notice, this has certainly been the case for me, understanding what this book is talking about has made a dramatic difference in my urgency to talk to people around me and to people I know to make sure that they are saved, to make sure that they understand what true salvation is. Because there are so many people, both inside and outside of the church, who are deceived. It keeps me up at night. But now that I have confidence in what this book means, I'm not scared of what's happening around me. I'm not scared of the ways of the world. I can see things happening and go, wow, I can see things lining up here. There's so much going on. And with that knowledge, people are going to say to you, well, hang on, how do you know that? And you can connect them in. You can say, oh, look, this is where you find teaching. People can catch up on these teachings. They can listen to the recordings, which are slightly edited, I must say, because there's some things that get discussed in the room that aren't for people who aren't in the room. And, that stuff does get pulled out. So, but this is how you connect people in, right? Once you go, oh, hang on, this is making sense. Oh, that's good. Well, I've got other videos. I've got other teachings, and people can actually watch those. You just don't get the benefit of being able to ask questions if you're watching an online series, which is the advantage of having it in the room. Historically, if you had have asked me 10, probably 15 years ago, what do I think of it? I'd read it. I had imagined in my head the things that were in it. Did I understand what that meant or how that fitted anywhere? No. And did that matter to me? Not really, because I went, well, as long as I'm right with God, but at whatever point that I hear the trumpet, I'm good. I know he looks after me. I know this is all good, and I don't need to know. And a lot of people have that view.
Yes, they do.
A lot of people have that view because they don't understand how this fits. It's just the difference it makes when you understand it and you're not scared of it. I think most people default to it doesn't really matter because they don't get it and they don't understand it. Yep. And at the same time, they look at other religions and they look at what's happening in the world and they're just like, oh my goodness, I don't really know what this means. When I had years where I was scared of, breastfeeding, it talks about, how awful it's going to be for breastfeeding mothers when this stuff all unfolds. And I'm like, oh, should I have children because I don't want to be a breastfeeding mother when all this stuff's unfolding? If I had have understood the context of that, I wouldn't have been scared. And I look at how much that fear kind of played. It's not just that one thing, but there's lots of little things that you go, well, hang on, I'm not really sure if I can like a God who's, vengeful and full of wrath and, it's a real challenge. But when you understand the context of all of that and the purpose of all of that and how it actually fits with the big picture and with the way the world has been established to work, you know that our God wants good things for us. And he wants people to be saved. He doesn't want people to end up in the lake of fire.
But surely they'd have to realise, watching the news or just watching the way life is turning out to be, that it is happening. Revelation is happening. So how could they not want to know because it started?
The problem is, though, people don't know all of the picture and they don't know all of the context. So they know kind of snippets. And that's enough to get them scared because they think things might be happening. But they can also be really easily deceived and misled by other people who don't know what this is going on about. Because it's easy to kind of get dragged off the path.
Because we've always had times that you thought oh, Jesus must be coming soon.
People were worried about barcodes. Yeah. We look back now and go, oh my goodness, what were we worried about? Barcodes were the mark of the beast. Remember that? Everything's got a barcode on it. I think that's...
the millennium. The computers are going to go down.
So everything's going to go kaput in the year 2000.
If you understand what the triggers are and what the first signs are and what the... Yes, you'll see it unfolding, and I can see it unfolding Which is why I have the urgency to teach it, so that people aren't scared. Yeah? And if you're not scared, all of a sudden the enemy has no power over you, which frees you up for God.